star play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to pin it in a row. It does. Runnels stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Runnels.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live, and we are excited to bring you another G5 college football coverage that you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. Another week of college football down. We're climbing to that halfway point, and guess what? We got an ODU win for our boy Justice. It's away, so you didn't get to maybe celebrate the way you might like at home, but
well, I went to a watch party, so I got to celebrate with other Old Dominion fans. So that was cool. Yeah, there's a local brewery here, Afterglow Brewing, that they are partnered with the NIL collective for Old Dominion, the Pride of ODU. They also recently released a beer where money gets donated to the NIL. And so they've been doing events for athletics, I don't know, since the summer. And they have really great beer too. So just a cool place. Got to enjoy it with other Old Dominion fans. So that was cool. Finally get the W. Harold Fannin Jr., man, dude, oh man, he's a beast. He's a beast. He was their offense. And I was just screaming, just triple cover the guy, put everybody on him or something, man. Because he was just torching Old Dominion, he did it to Penn State, he did it to Texas A&M. He's torched every team he's played this season, and Old Dominion was no different. Lucky to walk out of there with a win.
I did not get to watch as much college football as I would like this weekend. I got to celebrate. I had a college teammate, played college baseball, college shortstop. Brad Bloom made it into the Hall of Fame for our school, so I went back to celebrate with him and some teammates, and it was a blast. Tried to do things like we were young again. Don't recover quite as quickly as I used to, but we went to the bar scene. We rode. We have a drunk bus on campus that will take you to the bars and then back to campus. So we did a tour of that. We were fully immersed in the college experience. It was a fun weekend. It was about a 4.5 hour drive. So that drive back Sunday was a little bit rough. But went to our football game. Our football game did not go too well. I think it was 56-0. It was 10-0 at halftime. 10-0 at halftime and lose. I think it was 56-0, 63. It was not good. So, but hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please give us a rate and review. All right, I want to read this before we get into our 2020 guys. I want to read this comment from Eric Froton. He says, appreciate the love, my brothers. Gave you guys a shout out on the show this evening. Legit the best G5 duo in the land. We appreciate the kind words, Eric. If you don't get a chance to, or if you can get a chance to go see CFF College Fantasy Football with Eric Froton, I think JD, Yankee, who else is there?
Josh Chevalier.
Great dude.
Bridge, and CFF champs. Yeah, they all access. Fantasy Points All Access. Follow those guys if you're looking for some more college fantasy football information.
All right, let's get into the G5 Hive 2020 guys. Let me capture a little note here, and let's get going. Quarterbacks. Now, again, I kind of rank these kind of as who I would want leading my team based off of their pass attempts and yardage. Do you have that volume there? Do you have the yardage? If you don't have the yardage, can I see a path to getting there as we're getting into conference play here? If you're getting the yardage and you don't have the attempts, is it lucky? Is it reproducible? Things like that. So Emmett Brown comes in at number 1, had a bye in week 5. He dropped to number 2 in the G5 in passing yards per game with a measly 322.5 yards, just crushing it out there. Touchdowns, he's second with 13, third with completions per game with 24, and attempts per game with 39. He has the highest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 13 yards. San Jose State is averaging 33.3 points per game.
One thing I just wanted to point out for those that might be the first time watching us. So the 2020 guys on the screen here, you'll see below the week 5, 2024, you'll see the stats for each, category, each group, each position group. So in quarterbacks, if the guy's on this list, that means he's top 20 in pass attempts and passing yards on a per game basis. Have to be in top 20 in both of those categories for a quarterback.
Thank you for clarifying that. Number 2, Chandler Morris, North Texas, 37 pass attempts per game, leads the G5 in touchdowns with 16, overtook Emmett Brown with his bye this week. North Texas averaging 42.3 points per game. So Chandler Morris throwing it all over the yard. A sneaky name coming in at number 3. This one was what surprised me. And yes, they had a bye, but Joey Aguilar, App State, comes in at number 3. He leads the G5 in pass attempts per game with 41, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit. Averaging 305 passing yards per game. He only has 6 passing touchdowns, which, I just got done talking about how Chandler Morris has 16 and Emmett Brown has 13. So that's what's kind of like, he's got that opportunity. He's throwing the ball a lot, throwing for the yardage. If he can get that touchdown, I think that can be the thing that propels him to the next level. So I think process-wise, Joey Aguilar on pace, but those 6 touchdowns is in this bottom half of this 2020 group. Seth Hennigan, Memphis, just by percentage points, is completing more passes per game than Morris. And he's doing that 25.2 versus Morris's 25 completions per game. So essentially the same. But averaging 39 attempts per game, while Memphis is averaging 31.5 points per game. Devin Dampier, I agree with you. Gabe Davis, Devin Dampier is a lot of fun to watch. Unfortunately, we won't get to watch him this week as they're on a bye, but he leads the G5 in big-time throws with 17. He adds 65 yards a game on the ground, not including sacks, which leads this 2020 group. New Mexico, honestly, is surprising, but they're leading. They're averaging 32.3 points per game, which kind of shocking going into the season, in my opinion. Christian Veillere, Georgia State, least amount of time to throw of these 2020 guys with 2.27 seconds. I thought that was kind of interesting, but he's taking care of the ball really well. Again, Georgia State processes there. They're a sneaky team. Number 7, Jordan McLeod, Texas State. There's nothing really that popped out this week to me to mention here. So I'll go to the next group of guys. Braden Shager, Hawaii, has the most time to throw of these 2020 guys with 2.81 seconds, which is tied with Connor Bazelak, who we'll get to later. However, he has the most pressures per game with the 14. I feel like this is the same story as last week. Maybe just holding the ball a little bit too long. Maybe guys aren't getting open. There's a lot of things that can go into that. Mikey Keene, I feel like the same song and dance. He's just a solid quarterback. Does nothing just spectacular, but does what he needs to do. And like always, Jake Garcia, East Carolina, may lead us wire to wire in turnover-worthy plays. He's now up to 15. That's 5 more than the next highest in J.C. French with 10, and he's last in completions per game with 20. J.C. French, Georgia Southern, he's the last in yards per game with 224 yards per game. Nicholas Vadiato, Middle Tennessee, bottom tier of these next two that I'm going to mention. Bottom of the 2020 guys on attempts, yards per game, touchdowns, completions per game, along with Connor Bazelak, Bowling Green. So it's kind of like I would have him as this tier of like Mikey Keene, just above Jake Garcia, J.C. French, and then Vadiato and Bazelak there at the bottom. So we'll see if these bottom 4 guys will stay in there next week. Or if anybody will drop out, if we've got somebody to add to the group. Moving on to running backs. Now, these running backs are averaging 15 or more touches per game and 88 yards or more per game. That's all these guys that we're going to talk about here. So we've got Ashton Jeanty, Boise State, 13 touchdowns with leads to the G5. The next closest is Mario Anderson with 8. Like Justice mentioned earlier, he has 43 missed tackles on the year, getting 22 touches per game, which is actually tied with number 2, Ontario Brown, NIU running back, averaging 139 yards per game. However, only 2 touchdowns through 5 weeks. Ontario Brown could be one of those breakout names when we get to MAC play. If that touchdown, like you're getting all these touches, if you can start getting some touchdowns, that could really propel Ontario Brown. And just like that, Marquez Cooper could also benefit from more touchdowns. He leads the G5 in touches per game with 25, but only has 3 touchdowns through 5 weeks. So getting all that volume, you could see that turn around. Mario Anderson from Memphis, averaging 4 receptions per game, which is second in the G5. And like I said, he is second in the G5 in touchdowns with 8. Next, we've got Makai Hughes, Tulane. Then Anthony Tyus, Ohio. Braden Sloan, Ball State.
Tyus didn't get the start this week. I think Ricky Hunt got the start, but then like they were saying Tyus was hurt, but then Tyus comes in and still gets his 30 carries. So I don't know what that was all about.
Well, then they got a bye week this week, so we'll see if the bye week keeps Anthony Tyus up here or if he falls out. Ishmael Mahdi, friend of the show, Texas State running back, comes in there at number 7. Dean Connors, Rice comes in at number, or I guess Mahdi was number 8, sorry. Dean Connors, Rice leads the G5 in receptions per game with 5. He's averaging 27 yards per game in the reception department. And like I said, just 1 reception more than Mario Anderson. New to the list here is Terrion Stewart, Bowling Green. But he is pretty much at 0 the past game. 0 receptions per game, tied for 4th in the G5 with missed tackles, 4th with 23 with Marquez Cooper. So he can make you miss, but will not add much in the passing game. Rasul Faison, Utah State, was on a bye this last week, but had a back-to-back 100-yard games prior to the bye. Got Boise State at Boise State this week. And then Lee Beebe, I think, is new to the list this week at UAB.
And these guys, for the running backs, it was total touches, total yards, top 20 in both categories.
Moving over to wide receivers, and before I get started on here, I'll do it so you don't have to do it this time, Justice. We've got the top 20 in targets and receiving yards. So if you're in the top 20 in targets in the G5 and your top 20 in receiving yards in the G5, that means you're earning your targets and you're making good with those targets. So Nash, Ashlock, and Wysong, all with the double-digit targets per game. All the guys that I'm going to talk about here are averaging 70-plus yards per game. So we've got Nick Nash, San Jose State, leads the G5 in yards, targets, reception, touchdowns. He is the Ashton Jeanty of the wide receiver group. Luke Wysong at number 2 from New Mexico, and then Pofili Ashlock, Hawaii. Now, Pofili Ashlock is lower on the yards, but he just gets so much volume that like you feel comfortable having him as your wide receiver week to week. Just a crucial part of what Hawaii does runs through Pofili Ashlock. A name that maybe not a lot of people know, number 4, Dante Wright. Dude just puts up touchdowns and like 99 yards or more a week. He's tied for 3rd of these 2020 guys in touchdowns with 4, tied with Jamal Pritchett and Ted Hurst. Caden Robinson comes in at number 5, App State, still searching for his first touchdown of the season, averaging 6 receptions on 9 targets for 91 yards per game. Now, just think if he can get like a touchdown per game coming through. Like I said, Joey's throwing the ball a lot, and he's looking Caden's way. This looks like something that just has the potential to just explode here in the next couple weeks. Devontae Ross comes in at number 6 from Troy. He leads the 2020 guys in yards after catch per reception with 8.9 yards. He is 2nd in the yards per game with 106. But this like process doesn't kind of match kind of what I was talking about. He's the last of the 2020 guys in targets with 8 and 2nd to last of the 2020 guys in receptions per game with 5. So he's getting you the like low amount of targets in comparison to these other guys.
He's probably got the highest ADOT, I would assume.
I'm trying to remember. Ted Hurst has the highest ADOT with 18, but like he's just doing a lot when he gets the ball in his hands. So it's kind of one of those things that he's not getting there from a volume perspective, but he's making it happen. Camden Benjamin, Tulsa, comes in at number 7. Jamal Pritchett, South Alabama, comes in at 8. He's the last of this 2020 group with 78 yards per game, which, again, still a solid number. Cade McDonald, Miami of Ohio at number 9. And 10, Ted Hurst, Georgia State, like I said, leads the 2020 guys in ADOT with 18. I think he's getting like 4 receptions per game too, but he's hauling in the big ones. Let's get to our tight ends. Everyone's favorite, Harold Fannin Jr., Bowling Green. He is a beast. 11 targets, average 11 targets a game, 9 receptions per game, 135 yards receiving per game. Just amazing. Tanner Koziel, Ball State, 8 targets, 7 receptions, and 72 yards per game is what he is averaging. Holden Willis, Middle Tennessee, 62 yards per game. Dorian Fleming, Georgia State, 50 yards per game. And a new name, I think we've talked about him in this program at some point, but
we talked to him several times in the waiver wires.
Is Jake Newell, Akron. He's getting you 4 receptions on 6 targets, 33 yards. Now, he's not getting you a lot of yards, but of this, like, there's just like this tier break. And that 6 targets is kind of that tier break here in the G5. So let me quick get my stats up. Great radio, Luke. So it's like you got Harold Fan with 11, Tanner Kozo with 8, Holden Willis was 4, Holden Willis was 6, Jake Noel was 6, Dorian Fleming with 5, almost 6. So it's like it's kind of this like little break between them, but he's getting you the targets and he's catching just about all of them. He's got 2 touchdowns, with 4 being the most for a tight end in the G5. Justice, take it away for the defensive side.
All right. So for defensive linemen, we're using Havoc rate. If you're not familiar with Havoc rate, there's a lot of things that go into that calculation, but it's basically sacks, quarterback pressures, quarterback hits, tackles for loss, and then stops. And stops are defined by stopping the opposing offense on like a 3rd or 4th down. And so these are the top 5 defensive ends in terms of Havoc rate. Number 1, Bradley Weaver, Ohio, a havoc rate of 19%. It's his second straight week on the list, and he ranks first in total quarterback pressures among defensive ends with 24 pressures. Number 2, the only guy on this list that has been on the list every single week. Maybe he's going to go wider wire here in terms of havoc rate, and that's a guy having a phenomenal season. Mike Green, defensive end, Marshall, havoc rate of 18%. And he ranks third in the G5 in sacks with 5. And I think that's even third like in the country or pretty close to it. But Mike Green having a breakout season here for Marshall. If you watched our preview with the guys from the Thundercast pod, when we did Marshall, I think that was back like the first week of June, I think. Maybe it was July, somewhere around there. But they just raved about Mike Green and how he was going to be the man this year. And boy, were they right. He is the man. Number 3, Desmond Little, UAB, havoc rate of 16%. He has been on this list 4 weeks in a row. He ranks 9th in terms of total quarterback pressures with 15. Number 4, defensive end, Cameron Stewart, Temple, havoc rate of 16%. He's made the list 3 times this season. He ranks 4th in tackles for loss with 4. And rounding us out at number 5, first time on the 2020 players for defensive ends is Brian Ugwu from Miami, havoc rate of 15%. And he ranks 3rd in tackles per game for defensive ends with 4.75. Now let's move over to the defensive tackles. Same stat. We're using havoc rate for the defensive tackles. Number 1 this week and first time on the list, defensive tackle Anthony Hawkins, Bowling Green, havoc rate of 15%, and he ranks first among defensive tackles in sacks with 4. Number 2 has been on this list, I think, 3 weeks now. He was even on this week he was on this list before we split it up. We decided to split it up between D tackles and D ends. He was the only D tackle to make the list back then. Deonta Johnson, East Carolina, havoc rate of 12%, ranks first among defensive tackles and tackles for loss with 5. Number 3, a first-timer this week, defensive tackle Chris Fitzgerald from James Madison, havoc rate of 12% and ranks 8th among D tackles in stops with 10. Another first-timer here at number 4, Jonah Pace, Central Michigan, havoc rate of 11%. He ranks 8th in stops with 10. And then rounding us out at number 5, Peyton Zadroik, Air Force. It's his second consecutive week on this list. Havoc rate of 10%. He ranks 3rd in total pressures among defensive tackles with 11. All right, moving over to the linebackers. These guys are the tackling machines. They lead the G5 in tackles per game through week 5. Number 1, everyone's favorite, Sean Dolak, Buffalo, averaging 12.6 tackles per game. It's 3rd week in a row on the list. He also ranks first in stops among linebackers with 36. He's just having an impressive season all around. Number 2, Colin Ramos, Navy. It's 2 straight weeks he's been on this list. He's averaging 11.5 tackles per game, and he has 7 quarterback pressures on the season. Number 3, linebacker Dorian Hopkins from UTEP, averaging 11 tackles per game. He is the only player that's made this list every week, and he has 20 stops on the season. Linebacker Trevian Barnes, Florida International, averaging 10.8 tackles per game. His 3rd week in a row. He has 6 total quarterback pressures on the season, and he has really taken off. I would have expected, before the season, we would have put Reggie Peterson on this list. Standout middle linebacker for the Florida International. But after, I think it was week 1, Reggie decided he no longer wanted to play football. So he retired from football, and that provided an opportunity here for Trevion Barnes, and he has stepped up in a big way here for Florida International. Rounding out this list and new to the list and a teammate of Sean Dolak, Red Murdoch from Buffalo, averaging 10.2 tackles per game. and he ranks third among linebackers in sacks with 3. So it just kind of shows you who's leading this Buffalo Bulls defense. The 2 linebackers in Dolak and Murdoch getting it done in terms of tackles. All right, moving on to the defensive backs. We're going to start first with cornerbacks. And these guys are ranked according to adjusted net yards per coverage snap. It's a calculation that takes into account the yards they give up when they're targeted. You subtract any interception yards. You take into consider touchdowns thrown against them, subtract interceptions, and then you're dividing all that by the coverage snap. The top NFL guys are right around 3. And all of these guys here are in the not all of them in the negative. First week, not all of them are in the negative. I think that the top 3 are in the negative. Number 1, we've talked about him. We've been talking about him since our Worker Bee series with Coach and McDoom Island. He told us way back whenever we did that interview, that quarterbacks don't want to visit McDoom Island. And again, he nailed it, man. Matthew McDoom, Coastal Carolina, having a heck of a season. He has an adjusted net yards against of negative 0.3, and he has a quarterback rating against of 0.0. Quarterbacks do not want to throw against Matthew McDoom. Next up, cornerback DJ Harvey, San Jose State. He has an adjusted net yards against per coverage snap of negative 0.15, and he has a QB rating against of 21. Both McDoom and Harvey were on this list last week. A newcomer to the list, cornerback Dante Joyner, Arkansas State, an adjusted net yard against of negative 0.03, and he ranks second in G5 cornerbacks with interceptions with 2. Number 4, he was also number 4 last week on this list. Cornerback Rashawn Pleasant, Tulane, has an adjusted net yards against of 0.00, and he's averaging 3.4 tackles per game. And rounding us out, a newcomer to the list, cornerback Torrey Richardson from Temple, adjusted net yards against of 0.02, and has a quarterback rating against of 27.10. Moving on to the safeties, again, same criteria, adjusted net yards against per coverage snap. Leading the way for the safeties is Jerron Manning from Old Dominion with an adjusted net yards against of negative 1.28. That's tops in all of G5 among defensive backs. And he ranks second in the G5 safeties for interceptions with 3. The top 3 on this list are all unchanged from a week ago. Number 2 is safety Jalen Catalon, UNLV, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.51. He ranks first in interceptions with 4. As I mentioned last week, I'm just super excited for Jalen having a year where he's finally healthy. I guess 3 or 4 years ago at this point, when he was a freshman in Arkansas, he busted out to the scene, had an amazing freshman season, and then he just hasn't been healthy since then. He was at Texas last year. Now he's at UNLV, and it looks like he's finally healthy and playing the way that we saw in his freshman year. Number 3, his teammate at UNLV, Jonathan Baldwin, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.41, and he has a QB rating against of 10.7. Coming in at number 4, making his second appearance on the list, Al Maha Ali from Charlotte, an adjusted net yards against of negative 0.31, and he is 4th in the G5 in pass breakups with 3. And rounding us out, a newcomer to the list this week, Kawan McCray, Jacksonville State, an adjusted net yards against of negative 0.23, averages 4.75 tackles per game. And that's going to do it for our 2020 players this week.
Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in Week 6, as well as look forward to Week 7 of the 2024 season, as well as bring you all up to date on the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and review. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
Let's go!